Chancellor Angela Merkel has been visiting parts of Western Germany hit by the flooding, which has killed at least 156 people. The Chancellor described the damage as surreal and terrifying. She pledged rapid help from the government and said Germany must do more to tackle climate change. The disaster area spans more than 100 kilometers near the border with the Netherlands and Belgium, where the district of Ahrweiler was the worst hit. Merkel inspected the damage in the small town of Schuld. The swollen river swept away houses and left debris piled high in the streets. The Chancellor also met with survivors and emergency workers. She praised the resilience shown by residents.
It's shocking. The German language hardly has words to describe the devastation that has been wrought. But it's incredibly reassuring to see how people come together and help each other out, the solidarity that they have.
DW reporter Julia Saudelli is on the ground in the town of Schuld, which Chancellor Merkel has been visiting. Julia, this is a significant visit by the Chancellor. Townspeople are suffering, if not mourning. And here comes Merkel and what might very well be her last crisis-related visit as Chancellor. How are residents reacting to Merkel's visit?
Well, some people were glad that she came. They said it was important for the Chancellor, the leader of the country, to show her solidarity with the people here affected and the support of the government in this very critical situation. Others were more skeptical. They said that because of her visit and having to close off a lot of roads, it was hard for volunteers and rescue vehicles to come here and help with the cleanup. And they also said that it looked like for them like a photo opportunity in the election campaign, and that it didn't really mean that the government was really supporting the people here.
Is there anything, Julie, that the Chancellor could have said to ease their pain?
One thing residents here have told me is that they want to see support in the long term. They don't want the immediate aftermath of the tragedy to be the only moment where they see the government present. And Merkel did say that she is aware that this is going to be a long struggle to bring the towns back to what they were. So this is something positive, I would imagine, for the residents. Definitely concrete pledges in terms of money would help. People here want to know with certainty that economic help is going to come here, and that would be something that would bring some relief.
We've mentioned, of course, that Merkel was shocked at the damage, calling it terrifying. Describe how bad it is there.
Well, it is hard to believe one's eyes while walking through the town of Schuld here behind me. I walked through the town early this morning. There was nobody around and only destruction around me. Some houses have been completely swept away. Some have been gutted on the ground floor. There is nothing left there. There is debris strewn all over the town. Some roads have even been destroyed. There is almost nothing left in some parts, and it is really tragic situation here.
You know, I imagine some of our viewers who've been seeing these images just can't imagine this happening where they live. How are residents coping in Schuld?
Well, obviously, many people here are tired. It's been a few days now that they've been left without a home. Family members have died, and they have been working hard to try to clean up as much as they can. They're also distraught, but there is a sense of strong solidarity here. People are very grateful for the help they are getting from volunteers and rescuers, and there is a strong sense of community to try to make things better as quickly as possible.
You talk about the cleanup effort that's been underway. Who exactly is lending a hand in addition to some of those volunteers? Is the government providing the help that's needed?
Well, we've seen here today a lot of different institutions. We have the army helping, the fire department, the catastrophe protection service, but it has taken a while for a lot of these authorities to get to these towns. People here have told me that until yesterday they didn't really see a strong presence from the state and rescue workers, and instead a lot of volunteers, normal citizens who came from all across the country, brought their own tractors, their own tools to try and help out as much as they could.
As cliche as it sounds, Julia, it certainly does look like a war zone there. And I'm curious, what the town was like before this deluge.
It was a very charming town with many old houses and surrounded by beautiful nature, the river and forests. And just now, a lot was going on right after the coronavirus pandemic. We saw a family that had recently taken over a new pizzeria and was excited to see business blooming again. And this new tragedy is really dramatic, and it compounds what the town had already gone through before.
A picturesque West German town reduced to rubble. Julia Saudelli in the German town of Schuld, many thanks as always. I'm joined now by our political correspondent, Emmanuel Chaz. Emma, along with inspecting the damage, Angela Merkel was also examining the implications of this disaster for government policy. What exactly was the message after the trip?
Well, she really made sure that people who were affected knew what message the government had, and this is a message that says that the government is going to be there for the people, short-term, mid-term and long-term. That's what she said. She also did address climate change, and maybe we could hear to what she had to say about how it influenced what happened.
You cannot draw conclusions from one incident, but the sum of all the adverse weather events that we are seeing and the impact that they're having suggests clearly, if you believe the science, and as you know, I do believe the science, that this is linked to climate change. We need to speed up the fight against climate change.
Emma, Angela Merkel there with a very clear perspective on climate change. She only has 2 more months left in office. How does her message compare with what her potential successors are saying?
Yes, that's what's important, because she's not going to be there to implement the changes she's been advocating for in that message. And, you know, the front-runner candidate for the Conservatives, Armin Laschet, also happens to be the state premier of North Rhine-Westphalia, one of the worst-affected regions by those floods. And he also said that Germany needed to accelerate, you know, in terms of reforms, in terms of addressing climate change. But he has a very poor track record of addressing those questions in his region, in North Rhine-Westphalia. So this crisis, this environmental crisis that we are seeing unfolding, and also all the consequences it will have for the people in the regions, they could have an impact, could very much have an impact on the election, and especially on Armin Laschet, who was the favorite candidate up until now, but his response so far hasn't been quite you know, positive.
Yeah, those optics are hard to fight against. You know, I'm really curious about something. Have these floods elevated the issue of climate change as the primary campaign issue heading into the September federal elections?
It really did. It really did. Climate change really took center stage in those elections. Of course, climate change was already in the program of candidates, but for example, in the Conservatives program, it's not really addressed with concrete measures. You know, one has to address it, but there's no concrete elements as to how it's going to be fought. Then the Greens, you know, they were, when their candidate, Annalena Baerbock, was announced as a candidate, they were tipped to maybe be able to win the elections. Then there were a few missteps in the campaign. There were revelations of plagiarism, of falsehood in her CV. And then they were trailing behind, 10 points behind the Conservatives. But you know what just happened? This crisis, this environmental crisis, this could change everything.
DW political correspondent Emmanuel Chaz, thanks so much for that. While some German towns begin to assess the damage and cleanup, others are being hit by new flooding. In Saxony, near the border with the Czech Republic, roads and rail lines are closed. Further south, at the German-Austrian frontier, flooding and heavy rains are causing serious damage. In the town of Hallein, a flash flood has swept through the streets. People have been warned to stay out of cellars and basements.